when you read that intro, it sounds really impressive, and there's a big disconnect. Like, it feels like I didn't do any of those things. So putting together this set was actually really difficult. I'm in one of these phases where if you've been writing poetry for a long time, I'm sure you can relate. Just looking at anything, you just hate everything that you've written. So I was sending Phil some sample poems to use for the promotion, and I just was going through my documents saying, hate this, hate this, hate this. This is okay, I guess, hate this. I ended up sending him 3 pieces, and I think only 2 of them were used. So I'm going to read the other one, which is part of a sequence that I did with one of my mentors. And I think that's why I still like this. So I'm going to read 2 pieces from that sequence. And I think it was that collaboration that has almost given me permission to continue liking these poems, because I like his work as well. Okay, so this first one is called Coffee Cup Hand. Sometimes when you're holding your coffee cup with 2 hands in your lap, you take a sip when I'm responding to your question about favorite movies by saying something like, well, there's a big difference between favorite and what I think is best, as a way to buy time to come up with the perfect one to impress you. But when your drinking hand takes the cup away from your non-drinking hand, your non-drinking hand remains in that half-grip shape in your lap, like you could shift gears at any moment or start a thumb war I would willingly lose. Thank you. That's the silent applause. I really appreciate it, but it's also very interesting. It's still a very new thing for me. I'm adapting. The second piece in that sequence is called Red Rock. When you text me things like, you are such a Cancer, I know what it is you're saying, but I still want to text back, you need to capitalize the C, unless you're trying to tell me I'm a rapidly uncontrollable reproduction of cells. Instead, I text back, ha ha ha, what do you mean? And the gap before your response tells me that you've taken the full stop after the third ha the wrong way, like I'm mad at you or something. So I quickly start drafting another message that begins with, I'm so sorry, which is such a Cancer thing to do. But your next message of, I don't really know, interrupts me like that first big wave as the tide comes in before you've managed to pick up your beach towel and move backwards. And I don't know either. So I want to Google Cancer characteristics, but I know it's just going to piss me off because it's already pissing me off. No one substitutes birthstones for signs. So I text you, you are such a sapphire, and Google sapphire characteristics and find that the term sapphire encompasses all other gem varieties, excluding ruby, and of course, I am a ruby. As if I needed another metaphor to remind me how good I am at finding ways to derail our conversations just as you're getting close to telling me you love me, not because I don't want to say it back, but because I really want to say it back. All right, thank you. This next piece I'm going to use shared screen because it's a piece. I have a few of these that I just don't read out loud at readings because they do something typographical that just doesn't translate. So it always feels like if I do read them and people can't see them, that something's lost in the translation. So if you don't have access to video, I've tried this once or twice, and from what I heard back, it still sounded like a poem, so that's good. But yeah, I think this works better if you can actually see it. So it uses a typographical technique, erasure. So lines are struck through, which you'll see. And this is something that I use when I want to show that the narrator of a piece is rethinking what they're trying to say as they're saying it. So it's almost like you get these pieces of interrupted thoughts happening as the poem is being written on the page. So I hope that becomes a little bit clearer once you see it. Okay. Can I hide this? I can. Right, this one's called Opossum. Possum, opossum, oh. Opossum, I saw you sitting on the brick wall that separates Las Possums, from all those backyards. It was night and the last mile of my run, and you had fear in your eyes, but it was I who jumped. Holy shit. There you recoiled watching me go, and ahead, not 7 strides, I saw her. No one taught me how roadkill manages to make its way onto sidewalks before dying. It wasn't fear in your eyes then, was it? I could just about see them, drivers, psychopathic or bored, swerving out of their ways to get to her. Drivers, careless or distracted, and the shock of the bump and the too brief worry that she might have been something more important. Did she crawl her way there? Did she see you on the wall? Opossum, I want you to know that I covered her, that I went home to get a bag in which to carry her, that I ran around her. She was off to the side and in front of me, close to the curb, room enough for me to go to the left, to stay on the sidewalk. But I went to the right, around and down into the street, careful to be quiet, without coming between you. I know it was not enough. Thank you. So I have only 2 more pieces. One of them is incredibly short. The other one might be the longest poem I've written. I'm not sure. I've never read this out loud. It is, I think, my newest piece, newest complete draft, we'll say. There are other things I've been working on that just aren't ready yet. This takes inspiration from a poet called Amy Lowell, who I'll put in the chat, and specifically her piece, The Sisters. Amy Lowell's an incredible queer poet, American poet from the 19th century, related to Robert Lowell, if you know him. I think she's a much stronger poet, actually. And it's one of those instances, and I feel like this happens too rarely, but it was a huge breath of fresh air, where I feel like for the last however many years it's been, I have been reading quite a bit. And I try not to slack on that, which means that less and less often you encounter something new that just totally blows you away, sweeps you off your feet. And that was my case with Amy Lowell, and that poem in particular. In it, she writes about her poetic influences. So the sisters in her poem are Sappho, the ancient Greek poet, Emily Dickinson, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And I took inspiration from that piece to write The Brothers, and looking at some of my poetic influences. And the whole conceit there is that she gets to situate herself along poets that she looks to as mentors, and then gets to interact with them, which is, something you can only do in poetry. So this is The Brothers. It begins with an epigraph from Song of Myself by Walt Whitman, which is, and now it seems to me the beautiful uncut hair of graves. Tenderly will I use you, curling grass. It may be you transpire from the breasts of young men. It may be if I had known them, I would have loved them. The Brothers, after Amy Lowell. When I was younger, before I knew the value of books, I joked that the best sleep aid was Dickens. Now Bleak House could hardly be more interesting, so I set it aside, stare at the ceiling, relive the day, then the week, then the month. Sleep like tangents, like trying to read from the beginning of an article to its end without clicking anything. Sleep paralysis like grief. How could anyone possibly know without experiencing it? I try to scream, but it comes out as a finger twitching. A spider crawls across my face on its way home, a menace in the room in my blind spot. I can feel it staring at me. This is finally it, I think. And I grow sad, remembering all my unintentional last goodbyes. So stupid not to have predicted him finding me like this. So many I'll see you laters in my life, automatic to people I was leaving forever. I take them all back. I want closure. Where will my books go when I'm gone? Burn my poems, I say silently to the darkness, and a hand finally grabs my own, but it is gentle, and I can see him. There's the face of my brother, John Keats, full of sadness. His hand is warm, pulling me up. He leads me to the living room, never looking back. And there are my other brothers, Hart Crane and Gaius Valerius Catullus, in the middle of poker and waiting for John to take his turn. Hart is, of course, already drunk, having gone into my liquor cabinet and journeyed through bottles most expensive to least. While Gaius looks at me, Hart switches two of the cards on the floor and winks in my direction. I believe this man could use a drink, John says, with his hand on the part of my back I can never reach. I blink to see stacks of chips in front of me and 2/5 of a completed flush. Hart looks bored now that he is losing, now that the bottle of Cool Isla is all gone. You can tell that John only plays because it is something to do. He is the youngest brother, shorter and always trying to be noticed without seeming like he is always trying to be noticed. Gaius has only lightly sipped his wine. The anniversary of the death of his brother, who is also our brother, is days away. John, too, has lost a brother before we were family, but he is better at hiding it, at seeing color where there is little, or hearing birdsong when it is drowned out by machinery. Hart knocks over an empty glass by accident, but makes no reflexive move to catch it. Let's go out, he says. No dissent. Hart runs to the closet and brings back 4 3-piece suits. John wears a bow tie. Gaius looks uncomfortable in his jacket, so he drapes it over his left shoulder. Hart's suit is corduroy, but is somehow more extravagant on him than ours on us. He kisses all of us on the lips and says how glad he is that we are brothers. But we know how glad he is simply to be leaving the house. Gaius sits next to me as I drive, rolls down the window and shouts at the pedestrians, "Give us a poem!" John says that we mustn't do that to people, but no one ever listens to John. The road to the first bar is lined with many stop signs. At the next, a young man walking his Rottweiler signals us to go. "Give us a poem," Gaius says again. And the man begins reciting book 1 of Paradise Lost from memory as the dog sits. We wait there until he finishes, the cars behind us honking in IMs. Hart says, leaning out of the window to his torso. Rubbish. But Gaius is silent the rest of the ride. The first bar is for Hart. It is lively but not large. There is a room for a single pool table and an arcade machine. The owner is Irish and has decorated everything with home. I recognize the patrons, all friends from high school who never moved away, who found peace in this quiet city. Hart is getting chummy already, teasing the owner. What kind of Irish pub doesn't sell Irish whiskey? He goes to the jukebox. Gaius plays Street Fighter, so John and I talk. He asks me about love and death. Wants to know what to do when you love someone so much you cannot bear to be around them. I tell him life is unpredictable, and that if you wait on love until it crystallizes, until it is as perfect when held by hand as it is when held by heart, we will all be dead by then, and love won't matter anymore. He wants to know what it's like to have a younger brother, so I tell him it's like watching a better version of myself doing the things I wish I had done. He reads his most recent poem to me. It opens with the trochaic inversion, and when I ask about this, he says it was because it felt so urgent. Is that a good enough reason, do you think? And I don't have a satisfying answer for him. Neither of us is a beer drinker. I've already decided to leave the car here, so I order based on percentage. John orders based on glass shape, coming back with a snifter which he enjoys swirling. Someone has paid extra to interrupt Hart's playlist, and he is willing to take it outside over this. The bartender asks us to leave, so we call a cab. The second bar is for Gaius, the back room like a carnival, darts, shuffleboard, and 2 basketball machines. Gaius is the kind of person who wins at everything. No one wants to play him. He approaches a threesome sitting and talking in the corner, offering to buy them drinks if they play shuffleboard with him, which they do. John walks around and asks an employee to show him how the beer is made at the brewery. Hart looks bored again. I pass him my flask of Ardbeg. He asks me about love and death. Wants to know what being in love with someone other than yourself is really like. I tell him not to listen to people who say it's like finding a second half that completes you. We are all whole people. I tell him it's like finding the most incredible book of poems from someone you never even heard of, and the librarian telling you that since you've checked it out so many times, you can just have it. He says he's never stepped foot in a library and borrows books from friends without returning them. He wants to know how I would kill myself if I had to. I say it would have to be warm, since death seems so cold. Someone would need to find me, maybe pills on the porch while reading. What would you read, he asks. Shakespeare, of course. What, Lear, Hamlet? No, something funny, like Feste, Sir Toby, and Sir Andrew singing Hold Thy Peace. Hart smiles and quickly leaps onto the table, hitting the butts of 2 tankards together, shouting, Hold thy peace, thou knave, to everyone in the brewery. The bartender asks us to leave, so we call a cab. The third bar is for John. The music is low enough to be able to hear the person opposite without needing to lean into them. Hart is sad drunk by now and sits at the bar. John notices someone wearing a t-shirt with the phrase, prose before hose, and the familiar bust of Shakespeare. He approaches, asking if they know the inaccuracies, Shakespeare having been a poet and a dramatist, not a prose writer. Gaius and I play pool. He asks me about love and death, wants to know what you do when someone you love begins loving someone else instead. I tell him not to think about it as instead, think about it as well. But he wants to possess someone, which isn't love at all. I tell him my history of jealousy so he feels better about himself. Have you ever lost a brother? He asks. I've lost a sister, I tell him. And how were you able to keep on going? Barely, I say. It is of little comfort, but my brother holds my hand and looks at me anyway. My other brothers surround me. Gaius, you fighter. Will you ever learn the pointlessness of the anger you hold on to? Will you ever be treated poorly by your neighbor or your lover and be able to be happy just in knowing that birds exist and that the sun rises every morning? Will you find the gravestones of young men you loved in life and leave your laurel wreaths there without lying down on the grass waiting for the time to pass? And John, you lover, when will enough be enough? When can you be a poet and stop worrying so much about being a poet? When can a garden be a garden and not a scavenger hunt of rhymes? When will you go to bed at night and be satisfied with a job well done? And how now, Hart, you scoundrel? How the leaning over the bar and unloosing of taps to fill your empties while the bartender is distracted. How the charm of your smile and the seduction of your gait when the next brother asks, whose round is it? How the endless cigarettes from the teenage girls outside whom will never know the disappointment of loving you. I give to you, never using the words lend or borrow. I am willing. You are my brother. You are all my brothers. And I will ask you my questions when I am ready. But the bar is closing. The bell for last orders echoes into the night, joining the rummaging of raccoons and the idle engines and drive-thrus. John is the first to leave, and his goodbyes are as awkward as he claims. His hugs linger, past perfunctory, past discomfort, past understanding. Which direction he walks, I cannot tell. Gaius is next. He is inscrutable by now. I want to tell him so many things, to correct myself and say he must do his best to try to win her back, but he concentrates on the 8-ball and sinks it with grace, finally wearing the jacket that doesn't quite fit. Hart is the last, eyeing the dram that remains. He swirls the glass in front of me and tilts it and his head at a 45-degree angle. The scotch runs in thick lines. Do you know what they call these? And I can see how he wants to tell me that they are the legs. And I want to let him, but I too am drunk now. The legs, I say. The legs still running. His coat looks heavy on him, like he uses all his weight to stand. But his exit is effortless, like water. The relief is everywhere in the room now that we are all leaving. I blink my way home, where I sleep soundly for the first time in years. My brothers sleep next to me, whispering from their volumes the answers to all the questions I never asked them. Love, love, love. Thank you. All right. I've got just one more, but you're actually going to hear two pieces, and I'll explain that very shortly. Before I sign off, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Phil. Thank you to Marsha for helping make this happen. Thank you for everybody who showed up. It's nice to be able to continue being part of a community while the world is still very weird. The last piece is one of my shortest pieces. It's from my chapbook. It deals with grief, which I guess was touched on in that last piece. And I've asked Phil to read a poem from one of his collections that he very kindly gave to me, Rick Sings, because there was a poem in that I really responded to that, like the one that I'll finish on, is with stuff like grief, it's just so impossibly difficult to write about comprehensively. So in order to get at it well, you have to take something really specific, have a very small scope, be very simple, and hopefully the thing that you're talking about comes across in a more representative way. And Phil's poem, I think, really encapsulated that for me. Seems so simple on the paper, but speaks to so much more that's there. And it reminded me of one of the pieces that I had written about grief for my chapbook. So what's going to happen is he'll read his poem, we'll do the silent claps, I'll read mine.
Dear Rick, I put your photo in the clock award I got from Turning Point Mental Health. The clock part never worked, but I like it anyway. So your face is stuck over the frozen hands. It's an old black and white photo of you at 16, little Ricky, who you still are and will always be.
This is untitled, but it's from my best friend from college, who was an addict and who we lost to suicide in 2012. Matter cannot be created or destroyed, and liquids conform to the shapes of their containers. So I pour you into a cup and watch you evaporate.